Hello book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about the books and series that got me into reading. So this is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I am the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out and you can participate in a topic in the future, or you can suggest a topic. And this week's topic, I reckon I've wanted to do for quite some time because it's pretty exciting. I get to talk about the time that I got into reading and the book series that got me into reading certain genres. My list might be different from a lot of readers here on BookTube because I've noticed that so many people here on the bookish internet grew up reading. They grew up either reading at school or preschool or primary school age or elementary if you're in another country. I didn't even read in high school. I mean, I read my required text, or at least I cared to read my required text in year 12 of high school, but I only started reading for personal enjoyment at the age of 18 in 2014. Around 9 years ago, I finally picked a book up and I enjoyed it enough to want to continue reading. So today I'm going to talk about those books slash series that just so happen to be the gateway into me enjoying reading. I mean, right now I'm a book collector. I have a huge collection here, but honestly, that would not have happened if I didn't start reading at the age of 18. And seriously, every day I'm thankful that I got into reading, because if I did not get into reading, I would not have the career that I do, nor would I be able to talk about books here on my channel, nor would I have as much fun as I do. I have so much fun because I'm into reading. I guess without further ado, let's talk about those books that got me here where I am now. So yes, first and foremost, if you have been watching my channel for quite some time, you would know that the Divergent series is what got me into reading. The Divergent series was the first series that I picked up and absolutely loved and enjoyed. I was so addicted to those books. I happened to read the first Divergent book in the lead up to the movie. I believe I finished it around 6 days before the movie premiere. I think I would have loved the movie the first time I watched it if I did not just read it, because the book blew my mind. I ended up being so disappointed in the first Divergent film, and I know that the first Divergent film is actually like pretty good. It's a pretty solid adaptation. I don't like what they changed in the third act personally. There were a few things that I kind of wish were dwelled upon. I just think that a miniseries would have been better for a Divergent adaptation, but it was still an okay adaptation. But I absolutely fell head over heels for the book series. And then I read Insurgent, and I mean, I'm pretty sure some of you guys know how Allegiant went down. That was painful. But I'm also seriously so happy that I got into the Divergent series when the 4 novella collection came out. I remember being so excited. It was my first time I went into a bookstore for a new release. Words cannot describe how excited I was to finally see a book that I anticipated in a bookstore for the very first time. And I know some of you guys grew up on Harry Potter and Percy Jackson and don't understand the feeling from an older age, like having to experience it for the first time, but I just remembered realizing for the very first time, this is what it feels like. So Divergent is what got me into reading initially, and I am forever thankful for the series because I would not be where I am now if I never read it. And the next book I have to mention that got me into reading was The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I have not talked about this book in years. It is just mind-blowing how much of a chokehold this book had on pop culture 9 years ago. And honestly, I think the funniest coincidence of 2014 was the fact that Shailene Woodley, who was playing Triss in the Divergent films, was also playing Hazel Grace, and Ansel Elgort, who was playing Triss's brother in Divergent, happened to play Gus. And I remember myself and my bookish friends, my youth girls who were reading the book at the time, were just making funny snarky jokes about it. Yeah, you know, this was Tumblr period. Like, we were all very much into the memes. The chokehold that OK had on us. It was wild. I believe that 2014 Fault in Our Stars Tumblr memes need to be studied. They need to be put in the history books. The fact that all of them had such an effect on us is just mind-blowing. I don't know if the story has stuck with me all these years. I do often quote one of the quotes from the book, "Life is not a wish-granting factory." For some reason, that quote from The Fault in Our Stars in particular gives me peace and closure, and it has many times in my adult life. I'm pretty sure I quoted it last week. topic as well. However, in terms of the story, it's not my favorite John Green novel. There are elements of the story that I find a little bit problematic. If anything, I think my favorite John Green novel just so happens to be Paper Towns. I also very much love Looking for Alaska. I loved watching the miniseries. The miniseries has probably got to be one of my favorite adaptations of all time. I also liked the adaptation of The Fault in Our Stars as well. John Green, at some point, he had a hold on pop culture. At times I wonder whether or not I should reread these books. However, a big reason why I haven't bothered rereading these books is because I'm not too sure if they will hold up. Like, I loved reading Looking for Alaska the first time I read it, but the second time I read it, I realized that it wasn't as good as I thought it was. Looking for Alaska used to be my favorite John Green book, and then Paper Towns took that spot. I think because I understood the message more, but I didn't enjoy my reading experience of Looking for Alaska more than I did my experience with understanding Paper Towns. But anyway, The Fault in Our Stars has probably never been my favorite John Green novel, but it was the first one I read because it was so big at the time, and it just makes me so nostalgic. And the next book series that got me into reading, funnily enough, was The Hunger Games. I heard about the movies before I read the books. I actually read Mockingjay before reading the other two because I had watched the first two Hunger Games movies and I just wanted to know how it ended, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit underwhelming. But then I had realized when I was reading it, we wouldn't cut back to the capital. No, we were solely in Katniss's head. And that was very interesting because as much as I enjoyed my reading experience of Mockingjay, I kind of wish that the book series was consistent with the movies. That all being said, I'm really happy with what the movie makers did with the Hunger Games franchise. I'm so happy that we weren't just in Katniss's head the entire time, that we got to see the behind the scenes of what was happening. That makes me appreciate the movies so much more. Don't worry guys, I went back and reread the entire series before Mockingjay Part 2. As much as I enjoy the book series, I do prefer the movie series, and if anything, I think the movie series definitely motivated me to start reading. If I did not love the Hunger Games already, I don't think I would have read Divergent. So I'm really happy I got into the Hunger Games and I read the books eventually. And the next book series that got me into reading was the Shadowhunter Chronicles by Cassandra Clare. Except, however, I did read the Shadowhunter Chronicles in publication order. So I read the first 3 books in the Mortal Instruments series and then alternated between the Infernal Devices and the rest of the Mortal Instruments series. And what I have to say about that is, as much as the Mortal Instruments was a defining moment for many teenagers' lives back in the day, it was not my favorite series. It was definitely the series that got me into fantasy books, because as you guys could probably tell by the first books that I shared, none of the first 3 books were fantasy. Divergent is technically a dystopian sci-fi, The Fault in Our Stars is a young adult contemporary, and The Hunger Games is a dystopian. So technically the Mortal Instruments series was my first foray into urban fantasy / paranormal. And I'm not gonna lie, the Mortal Instruments almost turned me off the genre altogether. I didn't hate the Mortal Instruments, it's just I didn't love the first 2 books. It took me having to read City of Glass for me to actually really love the story, and then the Infernal Devices series happened to be really good. Funnily enough, I struggle to read historical fiction these days. However, the fact that I was able to get into the Infernal Devices series, knowing that I struggle with historical fiction, kind of blows my mind. I still do look back at that time fondly, and I'm seriously so happy that the Shadowhunter Chronicles has progressed to where it is now. I loved the Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare, and I also remember enjoying the Dark Artifices series when I read it. I love the novella collections. I like that we're getting Shadowhunter content now, even as I'm 27. I'm probably going to still read Shadowhunter content when I'm 35, so that's pretty cool. I never thought that I would take this long ride, but I mean, here I am. And I am happy that I persisted with the series, because as much as I struggled with the first few books, it was worth it in the end. Now, after reading the Mortal Instruments series and the Infernal Devices series, I was questioning whether or not I should continue on reading urban fantasy or if I should go back into dystopian. But I decided that I was going to go back into urban fantasy and pick Percy Jackson and the Olympians up. I ended up reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians for the first time at the age of 19. Funnily enough, this was the first middle grade series I had ever read. I did not grow up reading middle grade. I did not grow up reading Harry Potter. I wasn't allowed to growing up. I know that if my parents found out, about what the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices was about, I don't think that they would allow me to read that series either, because paranormal series weren't accepted in my household. However, because Harry Potter was very well known, like every single time there was a book launch, it would pop up on the news. My parents knew about Harry Potter, therefore they told me to avoid it. However, they barely knew anything about Percy Jackson. And I was 19 years old, still living in my parents' house, and I started reading Percy Jackson, did not tell them what it was about, and yeah, I fell in love. And honestly, opinions about the authors aside, in my personal opinion, the Percy Jackson series is better than Harry Potter. I know that people are gonna come for me for that opinion, but I just connected to Percy Jackson better. I related to Percy better. I struggled with my reading growing up, and that's because I'm dyslexic. So when I got to see that in a main character doing his own thing and seeing that he was different, it just seriously made me so happy to see that I was somewhat represented there. But also the story was really fun. The writing was really snarky and really funny. The pop culture references were a lot, but honestly, at the time, I was living for them, and I would probably still live for them to this day. I still think about it to this day. I still think about how amazing it is and how people are reading it at my age currently, and they're just obsessing over it. The fandom is still very much alive and kicking. Reading the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series was a very defining moment for me. That was when I realized that yes, I want to read more fantasy. That was my first middle grade fantasy, but it was the first urban fantasy that made me realize that I wanted to continue reading fantasy, so that was what I was going to do. I just love Percy Jackson so much, and it just makes me happy to recall those memories. And speaking of fantasy, my first high fantasy series I got into was the Throne of Glass series. Actually, no, I believe I read Shadow and Bone sometime first, but like Shadow and Bone, in my personal opinion, doesn't really count because it never really got me into high fantasy like Throne of Glass did. Throne of Glass got me into high fantasy, and I know that a lot of people say that it's not the best high fantasy out there, but it's a perfect gateway into reading more high fantasy. I don't think I would be into high fantasy as much as I am now if I never read Throne of Glass. It took over my life. It was probably one of the first ongoing series that I got into, and I have to admit, I did not love the first Throne of Glass book. I just found that the first Throne of Glass book was just okay. It wasn't anything special, but when I continued on to Crown of Midnight, and when I read the novella collection, The Assassin's Blade, I fell in love with the series. And then I read Heir of Fire, and I got to experience so much character development from Aelin. It was incredible. And you know how I was mentioning before the adrenaline that I started to experience when I saw a new release in a bookstore? I remember getting so excited for Queen of Shadows to come out. I remember going to my local Dimmicks and being so upset and visibly showing the staff that I was really upset at them for not unpacking the Queen of Shadows boxes. The Queen of Shadows release was such a big deal, and they're like, oh no, we'll have it unpacked by the end of the day. I'm like, I'm not gonna wait till the end of the day. No, I'm going to another Dimmicks. So that's what I did. I skipped my college classes that day so that I could go to another Dimmicks, pick Queen of Shadows up, and read Queen of Shadows. And it was the best decision ever. I mean, I don't even use my diploma in ministry. That's what I was studying back then. I'm still talking about the Throne of Glass series to this day. I think out of all the book series on this list, the Throne of Glass series is still making an impact on bookish pop culture. Everyone is still talking about it, and I think it's because it is in the worlds of Sarah J Maas, but people are still talking about Aelin and Rowan and Dorian and Manon and Alid and Lorcan and so many other ships, Hale and Irene. Oh my goodness, we are still talking about them. I swear the Throne of Glass series has bewitched us. And the next book series that got me into reading was the Lunar Chronicles series by Marissa Meyer. I believe this was the book series that got me into fairy tale reimaginings. I remember essentially saying to everyone, I'm not like other girls, I don't read fairy tale reimaginings, and look at me now. Here I am, like almost every week, talking about how much I am obsessed with Beauty and the Beast. I went through a major tomboy phase for quite some time in my teenage life, and I kind of wanted to cling onto that tomboy phase and to kind of solidify that I was not like anyone else. I wasn't that girly. As my 20s have progressed, I've become that girly. I've just embraced my feminine side. When it came to the Lunar Chronicles, however, this series was a perfect gateway into fairy tale reimaginings because it was a science fiction space opera reimagining. It was very much different from the fairy tale reimaginings that I would hear about all the time, and I very much appreciate it for that aspect, because if I did not read the Lunar Chronicles, Chronicles, then I don't think I would have discovered the fairy tale reimaginings that I have to this day. I mean, as I'm filming this video, I discovered one of my favorite reimagining series last month, and I have to give credit to the Lunar Chronicles. If I never read the Lunar Chronicles and if I never got into it, I don't think I would have ever seen the benefit in picking up a reimagining of a fairy tale. So yeah, I'm thrilled that I got into the Lunar Chronicles, and Marissa Meyer also pretty much defined my reading back then, because I also very much loved the Renegades trilogy as well. That is an honorable mention, but the Lunar Chronicles was what made me fall in love with Marissa Meyer's writing, and it's what got me into fairy tale reimaginings. The second last book series that got me into reading was Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. I remember absolutely devouring Vampire Academy. So unlike my experience with the Mortal Instruments series, this was a paranormal fantasy series that I immediately just gravitated toward. I know that the writing was cheesy at times, but I just fell in love with it. And honestly, I think the thing that I appreciate about the Vampire Academy series the most is that it takes place within an academy. You guys already know that I love the Crave series. I didn't grow up reading a lot of academy reads. I mean, I really loved the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series and the Divergent trilogy because you had people in close spaces with each other, living around each other. I liked that aspect of young adult fiction back in the day, but I very much appreciated that aspect of Vampire Academy as well. Just like with Harry Potter, because Twilight was gaining mainstream attention, my parents refused to let me read Twilight as well because they thought it was demonic. So they were like, no, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna let you read Twilight. And I just remember my older sister smuggling the books into our room, and I think my mom found out that she was reading Twilight when she was almost finished Eclipse. Mom just let her finish the series anyway because she was already doing it behind her back, and she had already borrowed the final book from her friend. I was not allowed to read Twilight growing up, and so this was kind of my first exposure to a vampiric series. I was exposed to vampires in the Mortal Instruments series, but in terms of a series that solely focuses on vampires, the Vampire Academy series is what got me into vampiric fiction. And I didn't read much more after that, but these days I read it every once in a while. I'm also really devastated that the TV show was cancelled. I'm not gonna lie, I actually really liked the Vampire Academy TV show, and I also did not mind the movie either. I mean, the movie just had the wrong tone. If the Vampire Academy TV series leaned into the books a little bit more, and if it kept up with its serious tone, I reckon that it could have been more successful, but unfortunately, Peacock just cancels everything. I mean, Peacock also cancelled One of Us is Lying, and season 2 left on a cliffhanger. It was the worst. Just because the Vampire Academy series has had 2 adaptations that have not continued past their first entry, that does not mean that the book series wasn't good. It was actually a very good book series, and I'm glad that I read it and it got me into paranormal romance. And the final book series that got me into reading was the Shatter Me series by Tahada Mafi. At the time that I read it, it was a trilogy and there wasn't an announcement for a 4th book. And when there was an announcement for the 4th book, I was so excited because if you guys don't know, the Shatter Me trilogy ends off on a open-ended ending. It's a very sweet ending, but there was no epilogue. I remember the fandom was kind of begging Tahada for an epilogue, and she was like, well, you don't need an epilogue because I'm gonna continue on with the series. And I'm really thrilled that she continued on with the series. I know that it's not the most well-written series. There could be even more character depth and development, and you know what? Warner's novella between books 1 and 2 could have actually just been included in the first book because that's what we needed. So many people skip over that novella and don't actually understand why Warner's nice in book 2. Because so many readers go straight from books 1 to 2 and don't read the novella in between because they don't see it as necessary. Therefore, they won't know what happened to Warner between the 2 books for him to change his mind, for him to be cruel to nice, you know? But yes, I love and appreciate the Shatter Me series so much. I'm just so happy that I read it at the time that I did. I'm pretty sure I read it in 2016, so it's been around 7 or 8 years since I've read it. It's just one of those series that made me realize that I still loved dystopian and I wanted to continue on with dystopian. I don't read as much dystopian anymore. However, who knows? Maybe if I revisit the series, I'll want to pick dystopian back up again. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the pink heart emoji with sparkles. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also, I have social medias. Matt Cheese Books on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com. patreon.com/gswizzle, and finally, I'm at TikTok, at gswizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.